Welcome to In Her Voice, a podcast created for women who listen to and live by their deepest wisdom, their inner voice. This was made for you, the woman who feels pulled to more, to lead, to create, to dream, and to be a world changer. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am an inner voice coach. Join me here each week as we explore what it means to reach for your inspired potential, all while honoring your worthiness each and every day. Hello there, this is Kelly, and you are listening to In Her Voice. And oh my gosh, you guys, I have such an amazing treat for you today. The amazing, wonderful Sarajane Case is here with me, and we are going to be talking about how to use the Enneagram to listen deeper to who you are and to really use it as a tool to access your inner voice in a better way. Oh my gosh, we have a beautiful, beautiful conversation. And if you don't know who Sarajane is, I'm so excited to introduce you to her because she has been a light in my life since I've known her just over the past month or so. Before we get to our interview, I want to let you know about something new that I have to offer all of you guys, and that is a new course I'm really excited to share with you, Tapping into Your Inspired Potential. And what this is a journaling-based email course. You do it at your own pace, in your own time. And what it really is about who you are becoming each and every day. So as you journal through the prompts that you receive each day for 5 days, you use those to begin to understand that potential isn't something that you have to live up to, right? Like I think we all think of potential as, oh, I'm not living up to my potential. That is not what potential is. Your inspired potential is about using the power that is already inside of you to make choices that align with your vision and your own powerful inner voice. And I'm super excited about this course because it's very similar to my journaling challenges that I've done, but I have created something new to be a part of this course. And that is for every single day of journaling, I have created a beautiful guided journal meditation. And you can stream it or you can download it to your device, and it has beautiful music. And it's just a way for you to journal and go through those prompts in a different and exciting kind of way that will help get you focused, that will help you ask yourself the right questions. So if you are ready to tap into your inspired potential, and come on now, who's not? I encourage you to go take a look at it. You can find the link to the course on my website at kellycovert.com/potential. And I will put that live link right in the podcast app that you're listening to. But just in case it's not there or not live in your podcast app, you can find that at kellycovert.com/potential. I hope that you take a moment to check that out. So Sarajane is the the host of the wildly popular Enneagram and Coffee Instagram handle. And that's how I discovered her, because you guys know, or maybe you don't know, I have been like obsessed with the Enneagram this year. It's just been this amazing tool for me to really discover more of who I am and to understand how I work and what things are holding me back and what things help me move forward. And so I discovered her because I was, digging all things Enneagram. And then I discovered that she is just an amazing human being, a beautiful, beautiful soul. And you are going to just fall in love with her voice and her gentle spirit and her wisdom. So let's get right to the interview with Sarajane Case. Sarajane Case, welcome to In Her Voice.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I have been obsessed with the Enneagram for about the last 9 or 10 months, maybe even a year. I don't remember exactly when it came into my life. And when I got the opportunity to interview you, I was like, oh, wow, what are we going to talk about? Because I don't just want to talk about what the Enneagram is, because you have a beautiful podcast all about that. I want to go deeper. So today what we're really going to be diving into is how we use the Enneagram to connect with our inner voice and to understand more about who we are and who we are becoming. But first, I do think we need to just have a tiny description of what it is. So in a nutshell, what is the Enneagram?
Yeah, so the Enneagram is essentially a personality typing tool, except for the difference is that it is internally motivated. So it's what drives you, what are you afraid of? And then it's movable. So you go to different numbers in times of stress and times of rest, and then you have levels of health, and you pull in other numbers. So it's a personality typing tool that is living and breathing, and you can kind of use it as a thing to work with. So there's 9 basic numbers, and each number has a basic driver, a basic fear, and then those numbers play with different specific numbers during different seasons and in different ways.
Mm-hmm. It is endlessly fascinating, you guys. You must pick up a book or listen to Sarajane's podcast about it. I just love it so much. Yes. So how does someone go about understanding what their number is? Because I find this to be very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So most of the time people take a test, right? They get online and they take one of the free tests, or maybe splurge for the $12. And that's wonderful and great and everything. But the real magic happens when you start to read. You start to read about your numbers. And I think that's the other thing about the Enneagram, is that only you can know. Only you know who you are. And so because it's so internal, it's all motivation. And a lot of the other typing tests that happen out there, you take the test and they tell you who you are and they tell you what that means. And then you listen or you don't. And with the Enneagram, it's like you go in and you discover and you read and you listen and you learn. And then you say, okay, this is where I am driven. This is what motivates me. And this is what I connect to.
Yeah, and that was my experience. I just in full transparency, I took the free test and then I took the $12 test because I thought when I got my results from the free test, I was like, that doesn't seem right.
What did you get for your free test?
For my free test, I got 7.
Okay.
And I was super excited because 7 is like the joy giver of the Enneagram. And I was like, yes, I'm a 7. And I was like, yeah, I don't really think I'm a 7. And so then I took the paid test and I got 8. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't really feel right. And so 8 is very, I don't know, what would be a word you would describe an 8 with?
8s are the most brutally honest of all the types. So they're going to be a lot more likely to tell you the blunt truth and then to kind of take control of the situation and become the leader of that situation, and potentially more confrontational than other numbers.
Mm-hmm. And some of that resonated with me, but I was like, yeah, but I don't really feel like I'm a confrontational person. And there were a lot of pieces of that didn't quite feel right. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put the quizzes away. And then I just started reading books upon books and on the internet. And I actually discovered that I am a 1. And that, and it is exactly like you said. As I was reading, I was like, wait a minute, they're talking about me. This can only be about Kelly Covert.
Yeah. Yes. That's when you know. That's the moment.
So it was a really interesting process for me in discovery. And I still think I'm still discovering, which I love that about the Enneagram. But what I'm really interested in hearing from you about is how we can use the Enneagram to connect deeper with our souls.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you mentioned when you said they wrote this about me is in how that's the starting point with the Enneagram, and I think that's the magic of it, is that's the beginning, is that moment of understanding your description and being like, oh, I resonate with this number. That's where most tests end. And I think the Enneagram starts there. So you say, okay, I know my number. So now what does that mean for me? How does that impact my life? So what are the behaviors that stem from that number that maybe are serving me really beautifully, and then what are the ones that aren't serving me very well at all, and how can I learn to see them, hear them, be more aware of them, and then to work with that. And I think the move for me that I find the most fascinating when it comes to self-awareness and true knowing of self when it comes to the Enneagram is that move that you do in stress and in rest. And I approach that a little bit differently than a lot of other people who speak about the Enneagram approach it. A lot of people say, okay, when you're a healthy 1, you move to 7. I'm more inclined to say that when you feel safe as a 1, you move to 7. And so what that means to me is that a number moving to their type in rest, that means that they feel secure. They feel open and able. So a 1, that means that you feel safe to move to 7. You feel safe to be spontaneous and playful and light and silly. And that when those elements of yourself show up, is a signifier that the things that are surrounding you are supporting you. Mm-hmm. And then when you take that stress move, I see that less of it as a move of disintegration, because I think that is innately a kind of a harmful term to use on ourselves. It's like, I'm disintegrating. But more of, I need a little bit of self-care. Like these behaviors are starting to exhibit that only show up in my seasons of stress or my moments of intense stress. So how can I nurture myself and comfort myself and support myself in that process? So each number is going to move to another number. So once you know those numbers, and I can run through those, you start to see the things that indicate that you're in a season that needs a little bit of care, or you're in a season where things are really good and you can bring more of those things into your life.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah. Do you want to just quickly, I feel like I don't want to overwhelm people too much with numbers if they aren't familiar, but I think that for people who are, it might be helpful.
Yeah. So for a 1 in a season of rest, you're going to move to 7. So that means you become more light, playful, spontaneous. And then in a season of stress, you're going to move to 4, which is going to be a lot more, that's kind of tipping into that melancholy, becoming a little bit emotionally indulgent because you're moving to the lower levels. And then for a 2, they're going to move to 8 in a season of stress, which for 2s often just means that they're pushed to the limits where they have to set aggressive boundaries. And then in a season of rest where they feel safe and secure, they can move to 4, which is where they become a lot more independent, self-reliant. They take their time to enjoy the beautiful things in life, whether or not someone else is sharing that with them. And then for a 3, they're going to move to type 9 in a season of stress. So they often will burn out and crash and kind of numb out. And then in a season of rest, they're going to move to 6, which is the loyalist. They're going to then start looking around and really helping other people to rise and succeed and looking out for the people in their life and building that community around them instead of competing with others. And then for 4s, they're going to move to 1 in a season of rest. So that's they feel safe to become more structured and disciplined and a little bit more concerned about right and wrong. And then a 4 in a season of stress is going to move to 2. So they can often kind of exhibit some of those lower levels of 2, which can often look like codependency or kind of offering help when it's not asked for and becoming resentful. And then 5s move to 8 in a season of rest, so they can become a lot more self-reliant, a lot more self-promoting, and a lot more likely to take charge. And then in a season of stress, they're going to move to 7, which is going to cause them to be a little bit more scattered and busy and a little bit more inclined to ignore their feelings. And then in a season of health for a 6, or a season of rest for a 6, they're going to feel safe to move to number 9, which is the most relaxed, easygoing, secure, their healthy states. They're really aware of other people's perspective. They're really peaceful and peaceful oriented. And then when they're stressed, they're going to move to 3, which can cause them to be a lot more concerned with competition and comparing and making sure that they are better than the people that they're surrounding themselves with and kind of worrying about that. And then a 7 in a season of stress is going to move to 1. So 7s can actually become pretty critical in that season of stress. And that's a good signifier that they need a little bit of care. And then a 7 in a season of health or a season of rest is going to move to 5. So they become more likely to hone in and focus on one thing at a time and be okay with just simplifying what they're putting out and focusing on just one area. And then our 8s are going to move to 5 in a season of stress, which means they're going to be more likely to isolate, become more internal, become very focused on what they want and they need. And then they're going to move to 2 in a season of rest, which means they feel safe to serve and to look around at the needs of others and really make sure everyone is taken care of and not just them. And then we have 9 finally, and 9s, when they're in a season of health, they move to 3, which means they just become more comfortable and less afraid of risk and able to put themselves out there and try new things and really put success as a priority on their to-do list instead of being afraid of what that could bring in terms of stress. And then a 9 in stress is going to move to 6, which just means they can become kind of worst case scenario. They can worry a lot and become a lot more anxious and nervous. So that's kind of the general gist of how it kind of moves around.
What I find so endlessly fascinating about this is as a 1, I tend to be very judgmental of myself and sometimes of others. And that's something I've really worked on a lot in my life, even before the Enneagram came into it to sort of show me different aspects of that. But I think that it's so beautiful to see how every single number, every single position on that circle has light and dark.
Yes. Oh, that is my favorite thing about the Enneagram is, and I think that's, it's shadow work. It's the ability to really look at what are the parts of my personality that make me uncomfortable and make me feel too seen and too witnessed, and how are those equally paired, oftentimes directly paired with the things about me that are the greatest. And how can I look at those and hold them simultaneously and say, this and this are one, and they're both me, and they're both beautiful, and they're both okay. And just because this one's harder to work with and doesn't always serve me doesn't mean that I'm less valuable because it's here. Because if that wasn't here, then all of this really, really, really good stuff wouldn't be here either.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it has, I think sometimes we can have a feeling that we need to abandon the parts of ourselves that we don't like. For example, I consider myself to be a recovering perfectionist, but as a recovering perfectionist, that's also acknowledging that I am still a perfectionist. And instead of abandoning that, instead of letting it go, I really can use what I've learned from that in my life to move forward. And I love that we don't have to be so ashamed of these things that we can't own them.
Yeah, and I think so often when we learn about things and we learn, okay, this thing doesn't serve me very well, we think that means that we need to grow beyond them. And then that causes us to feel like we're failing, right? When we don't grow beyond them, we feel like constant failures because those innate tendencies that we have, which we develop for a reason, we learn to do these things and they kept us alive and they kept us safe over periods of our lives. They aren't things to be, we don't grow past them. They kind of just become easier and easier and easier to deal with and to work around and to have compassion for versus, there's some destination out there that we're going to get to one day where this thing doesn't exist.
Yeah. I love the idea of duality. Like I'm super into this idea that we are both and, I am perfect and imperfect. I am strong and weak. And I think when we can tap into that, it brings so much joy to our life.
Yeah. I mean, I think some people who, when we're struggling with the Enneagram, we're struggling because that discomfort with the shadow, that discomfort with the darkness. But there's so much power if you're willing to trudge through the mud of that for a little while and just kind of look at it honestly and deal with kind of those icky, weird parts of doing that. On the other side of that is the ability to kind of laugh at it and acknowledge it from a place of lightness. Mm-hmm. And you don't get there you don't get there from just being like, okay, now I accept this. You really have to look at it and face it and deal with it and sit with it. But on the other side of that is just so much, like that is the next level of like true love and self-acceptance, is the ability to be like, yep, I do that. It's real.
Yeah. I love that because there's so much allowing there. Mm-hmm. And it just feels so free. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your own journey of understanding where you are on the Enneagram and how you've used that. If maybe you could tell a story about how it's helped you become more of you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, for a long time, I didn't know my type for like 2 years. So I was studying the Enneagram for years before I fully committed to what my number was. And the reason is, there's several reasons, but the first one was that I tested as a 2. And there's a lot of aspects of 2 that I resonated with. Like, people often meet me and they describe me as like, a warm hug, or like I'm their mother before they know me. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely more presentation than internal experience. And so I heard that and I was like, well, 2s are represented like that, but I don't really feel driven by the things they're driven by. And then I, for a while, thought I was a 1, and because I'm very disciplined, or, what you would say is disciplined and focused and driven and very productive. And so I was like, well, maybe I'm a 1. And, but it never quite settled for me. It was kind of like, I see a lot of 1 in me, but it doesn't quite feel right. And then I thought it was a 9. I went around the whole chart. And so at one point or another, I thought it was almost every number. The only number I didn't ever think I was a 6. And I finally, I read 7 early on when I took the first test, and I said out loud, like, I feel like they just described my whole life experience. But I had someone in my life at the time who's like, I don't see you as always happy though, like as always needing to be happy. And I was like, yeah, I don't really, like, I'm comfortable with the fact that I get sad. Mm-hmm. And so I just dismissed it for a long time. And then I finally revisited it, and I started listening to podcasts and YouTube videos and reading books, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I am so 7. It's uncomfortable. And it really didn't fully digest until someone mentioned something that a 7 had done. And I think this is what it is that most people don't give 7s a hard time. Like, they don't talk about the shadow of 7 very much, because most types say, I want to be a 7. I wish I was a 7. 7s are the cool ones, like the fun ones. And most 7s want to stay there. We want to be like, yeah, we're the fun ones. We're cool. Don't look at the rest of it.
Face forward only, please.
Yes. Yeah. And so when someone mentioned something about like someone bailing on them or something, and I was like, oh no, were they a 7? And they're like, oh yeah. I was like, oh yeah, there it is. And that's it for me, is like the shadow of a 7 for me looks like the inability to sit with discomfort, in terms of like, I want to make sure I always have my needs met. And if those needs aren't met, I won't do the thing. I will avoid whatever the situation is. And I'm very quick to say, you do what's best for you, I'll do what's best for me. And oftentimes that takes place in a lot of situations and terms of relationships too, of like, yeah, well, that we have conflicting desires and needs. So you go take care of your needs and I'll go take care of my needs. versus like, let's find a compromise. Let's find a place where we both thrive. And this relationship is more important to me than my own happiness. You know what I mean? Not saying our relationship should never take place of our happiness, but like my momentary happiness is a different thing than like lifetime happiness.
Right.
And so when I started actually letting people, like hearing people talk about the shadow of a 7, I was like, oh, there you are. There it is. That's the truth. Because I've been on that journey of seeking truth for so long that when I couldn't quite get the depth of a 7 until I started being really honest with myself. But the amazing way that that's shown up for me, and I think the biggest transformation for me in terms of understanding my number and how it's impacted my life, is that awareness of that stress and rest move. So for me, showing up as a 1 is such a good indicator that I need some care. When I start to get really critical of my husband and look for everything he's not quite doing right, or if my joking example of this is that like when he puts the mustard in the wrong place in the fridge, to me it's like, oh, when I start to care about that too so much, I'm like, oh, I need to take a day off. Like I need some rest. I'm overexerting myself right now. Instead of what used to happen, which is I would be like, why can't you get this right? Like I don't understand why you don't see it like I see it. And now I understand, oh, of course he doesn't see it like I see it. He's a 4. He sees it completely different things that I see. And he brings completely different things to the table that I need.
I'm just laughing because my oneness doesn't show up in ways of like neatness or like OCD cleaning or anything like that. So for a long time I was like, no, I'm not a 1. And then someone mentioned about how like if you ever switch things around in the dishwasher,
ooh,
you're probably a 1. I was like, oh, oh yeah. But it is, I think, that dark side of the number that requires us to be honest with ourselves. And that is where the growth is, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, and I think that that's where, when people are trying to figure out what their number is, a lot of times they're looking at multiple numbers that kind of play together. And sometimes we only resonate with the dark side of one number. Like I only get, like, I resonate with a depth of 1, but like the darker side of 1 is what I was like really resonating with when I was identifying as that. And then the 5, I only resonate with the high end of 5. It's like all these great parts of 5 I've got. But the 7, it's like this wholeness in there of like, oh, I am fully known here. Mm-hmm. And the things I've struggled with repeatedly over the course of my life are represented in this number versus like I'm experiencing this during a season. Mm. And I think you're right that the darkness, like being willing to look at the darkness and pair that with the light, like that is what we need as individuals, Enneagram or no Enneagram. It's just our ability to hold ourselves as complex human beings and that all of that be good.
Yes, all of it. All of it is good and needed. Mm-hmm. So for you, once you discovered your number, that you're a 7, then your Enneagram starts. So you say, right? Like, yes. Then it starts. So what are some of the practices or some of the ways that you learned how to be in that space?
Mm-hmm. So for me, that's holding awareness of what are my like when I'm making a decision, I have to create more space. Because as a 7, I make decisions very fast. I decide I'm going to make a summit and I make a summit, and
yes, you do.
and decide I'm going to end a friendship and I end a friendship. I forget to like breathe and say, you don't have to make that decision right now. You can sit with that feeling and let yourself know that like, yes, this doesn't feel good in this moment, but that doesn't mean it won't feel good in the next moment. And if you can just give yourself a little bit of room to experience the full range of the experience instead of trying to solve it, then you can move forward in a more graceful manner, and you do less harm, to yourself and to others. And I think that same thing applies when it comes to like knowing that health move for me, or that rest move of I simplify in rest, and intentionally taking that and saying, is there anything in my life right now that makes me feel like I can't simplify? Are those external factors or internal factors? And then how can I play with those? And how can I experiment with making myself feel more secure to simplify? And I think that that's what it is for every number, is really saying, not disciplining ourselves in these situations, but nurturing ourselves and saying, what is it that I need to show up in the best version of myself, to show up in a way that does less harm to myself and to others.
Yeah, that's good. So one of the things that I'm going to ask this in the form of a question that I know my personal answer to, but I'm just really interested in hearing yours. I feel like some people will hear this and say, well, I need someone to tell me what that is for me, what that looks like for me. So like you said, you need to create space around your decisions. But I wonder, do you think we need that? Or do you think it's there for us?
I think it's there for us. And I think that it starts with awareness. And I think that's what the Enneagram does for us, is it shows us where to be aware. It says like, hey, these are your levels of health. Here are the things that are going to show up during these different seasons of your life. Just look at them, know them. And then that awareness and that willingness to look and hold is going to make it so much easier for you in terms of knowing what to do. Because when you have the awareness and when you're willing to look at it, from then on out, every time you experience something, it's just going to be a little ding. It's just going to be like a little, hey, there's this thing showing up. And you don't necessarily even have to do anything with that right away. Just notice it and pay attention to it, and then put action to it when you're ready.
I almost think that having the knowledge of the Enneagram and then bringing that awareness into our life allows us to ask our inner voice the right questions.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's that awareness that the Enneagram brings, and then we can ask the questions that we didn't even know we needed to ask. And that's what I have found in my own life, and it sounds like that's what you do on a regular basis. And it's just such a beautiful, powerful place to be in your life.
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, just the willingness to sit with your own thoughts and ask yourself questions and answer them is a true gift that you can give yourself. And I think that's the magic of being willing to talk to your inner voice. And I often do that verbally, while I'm driving my car. I often do that every single day in my journal, like just ask myself questions and see what the answers are. Because I think a lot of times we forget to ask, and we think like, oh, I'm so out of touch with my intuition. I'm so out of touch with my inner voice. But it's like, they're there. They just are waiting for you to talk to them.
Totally. I love that. I love that you literally ask yourself questions. I'm going to start doing that. That's a great idea. Journaling is a big part of my practice, but you can't journal while you're in the car.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You'll be amazed at how much you talk to yourself if we like turn off our podcast and our radio. We can get a good conversation going.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So what's the conversation that you're having with your inner voice right now?
So right now I am in a season of interesting business shifts. I had just agreed to a niche with myself and said, okay, I'm going to focus in on this topic and go all in. And I think that when you make a decision like that, the universe says, oh, you're willing to commit to something. Here's what you really want. Here's what you really need. And so with that, my whole kind of perspective changed when Enneagram and Coffee came to be, and the way that it came to be. And so now I'm sitting with my inner guides and like sitting with my intuition and saying, all right, what's next step? Because I can't tell the future. I can't see where I want to be in 5 years right now, but I know that I want to what feels good in this moment and where I want to be putting my energy in any given day. And so I'm just kind of taking it moment by moment at this stage, which is really good progress for me as a 7 because I like to live in the future and always have a plan for what's coming. And so right now I'm just allowing, and my inner voice is saying, just listen to me, and every decision you make, let's check in. Enneagram and coffee itself was an intuition move. It was like, I'm following this desire of my heart, and I'm going to say yes to it. And I don't know what the outcome of that yes is going to be. And I'm very unattached to the outcome of that yes. But I know that I want to take this step. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's where the magic lives, you know that.
Oh yeah. And I think what the key word that you said there was being unattached.
Yes.
Knowing that you can have a plan and there still might be something better.
Yes.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Sarajane, thank you so much for being here. You briefly mentioned your summit, and I've been seeing things about this. So why don't you share with my audience a little bit about what you have coming up?
Yeah. So we have the Enneagram Summit coming up. It's all online, all digital. There's over 30 workshops at this point for $27 if you join us live. And we tap into all kinds of topics around the Enneagram. So how do you type yourself? How do you parent with the Enneagram, relationships? We talk about leadership and work and a ton of amazing topics. And then we have people speaking about like amazing leaders in their own industries, talking about what it's like to be their number and just what life is like as their number and how they've reached the level of success that they've reached as their number. So it's going to be over 5 days in February. Doors are open right now. And if you go to Enneagram and Coffee on Instagram, you can get the link to join the summit there. And then they'll be open until February 4th when the summit, or is it February 11th when the summit starts?
February 11th. All right. We will put links to all of that good stuff in the show notes and in whatever app you're listening to this podcast on. So if you are interested in learning more about the summit, you can go check it out. And I'm sure after sitting under your voice for the past 30 minutes that people are going to want to jump on that because your gentle wisdom and encouragement is an inspiration. So thank you so much, Sarajane.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was such a good conversation.
I really, really hope you guys enjoyed that interview. And if you haven't discovered your Enneagram type, go out and get a book or hop on the good old Google and start reading about the different types because it is just like this whole world of amazing knowledge and depth to who you are. So if you are all about knowing who you are more and stepping into that, and listen, I know you guys, I know that that's what you want, that's what you yearn for. I encourage you to go check out also my Tapping into Your Inspired Potential course. I am so proud of my meditations that I've created. So I hope that you love them, and to get yourself that course, and it's really affordable, you guys. All you have to do is go to kellycovert.com/potential, and then you can get hooked up. So as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being you. I want you to know that you matter. Your gifts matter to this world. Your purpose matters. You are important. You are worthy.